Welcome to TXAPA Live. I'm Chuck Fuller with TXAPA, and with me today we got Travis Patton with TxDOT, Flexible Pavements Materials Director. Try it.
Flexible Pavement Section Director.
Section Director. So we got to get that right. He's the Section Director. So Travis, we're going to talk about the importance of the time frames within the specification. You know, we took a lot of time to rewrite the specifications on 3076 and 3077, and of course the other four have just come into play in April. But we have some experience now with 3076 and 3077, so I thought maybe we would talk about how important it is for the reporting. When we report, who we report to, and why is it so important. So if you want to, we'll just jump right on into it. So the first thing that we have here is on Table 6, which is the test method, test responsibility, and certification. Table 6 is broken up into like 5 different sections, isn't it? It has a lot of responsibilities. Yep. So explain to me the contractor's responsibility and the engineer's responsibility. When we talk about this, the contractor is QC and the engineer is QA.
Correct.
Yeah. So kind of walk through some of the test procedures that we have here. We got, this is the first section is aggregate and recycled materials. So you see the certification levels that we're responsible for on it. And why is it so important that the engineer, Los Angeles abrasion, magnesium soundness, and macro Duval, that's only the engineer. Only you guys can do that.
That's right. So we maintain a QM list for all of the aggregate samples, so the bituminous rated quality source catalog. So all of that material is actually tested at MTD, and that is a pre-approved quality material to be used in hot mix projects.
So when we're talking about the aggregates, the sampling, I mean, you could be Ag 101 or you could be a level 1A, right?
Yeah,
to be able to sample that. And that's all going to be required for the design section, right?
That's correct.
So when we talk about design, when we're designing the asphalt, what other test methods that only MTD can perform?
So another one, now this is aggregate and recycled material, but another one would be binder, right? When we get to binder, that's going to be the QM sample, and that's maintained by our binder lab at MTD. The suppliers send in a monthly sample. We do all of the testing, and it's in a pre-approved list. So when you go to a hot mix project, you're utilizing a pre-approved asphalt binder, and then MTD will then also test one production sample as well.
Right, so underneath this requirement here, this is the asphalt binder and tack coat sampling. So the contractor, 1A and 1B, will be taking a sample, and then the QA, 1A or 1B, will be witnessing that and then taking possession of that.
Correct.
But all the test happens at materials and test.
At materials and test. And the reason that the contractor is actually doing the sampling here is more so for safety reasons. Very dangerous dealing with hot binders coming out of plants, coming out of sampling ports. So that is reserved for the contractor, and then TxDOT would be there to witness to ensure it's being done correctly.
But only materials and tests can do the test.
Correct.
So there's no referee test. Absolutely. Thank you, Jimbo. So when we talk about material sampling, what do we have here for 500C? We have hot AC samples, right?
Correct.
And then we have emulsion samples.
Correct.
And we have videos YouTube that Jim Warren had put together describing the correct method of being able to take these samples. So how important is it to take the sample correctly?
Very important. If it fails, you will have a failing sample, right?
Yeah.
And so hopefully that failure is going to happen earlier in the project as opposed to later in the project. You don't want to test a failing production sample and then have to second guess the rest of your material.
Right. So our hot AC sample, so I'm the contractor and I'm pulling the sample, you witness it, and then after it cools down, you take immediate possession of it.
Correct.
Right? And if it's going to be tested, you send it off to materials and test to have it tested.
Correct.
But this sample should not be laying around in the storage farm or anywhere else. Once the QA individual takes it, it's their sample. It's chain of custody is very important.
Chain of custody.
So and we're going to talk about chain of custody quite a bit throughout this because, again, not only is the sampling and the testing real important, it's how that material's handled and who's handling it. So we got the Hamburg wheel test also here for the mixed design and verification. So the Hamburg, materials and tests can perform the Hamburg.
Yes.
Or we have other individuals that are certified to be able to run the Hamburg. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we have a material producer list. I believe there's around 60 certified machines on the list. So you can use that throughout the entire state. MTD does have 6 of those machines. So if you need testing, MTD can run it.
Great. So, and again, when we're talking about sampling and who's responsible for it, the production sampling, again, the contractors doing QC, and we're going to get into that a little bit later on, and then TXDOT's QA, which is going to be quality assurance, quality acceptance. So what other test in here that only MTD can run is the overlay test?
So the overlay test doesn't apply to this example here, but you're right. So currently MTD has 4 overlay machines, and we're the only ones that have a certified overlay machine to run it. I will say that we're currently working on an approved list.
Right.
So shortly we're hoping to have somewhere around 10 approved machines throughout the state, and we would maintain a sampling proficiency sample similar to our Hamburg system for the overlay, and then we would have approved overlays throughout the state as well.
So the new specification for our 4 new, the TOM, the SMA, PFC, and thin bonded, we need the overlay test for the TOM.
Correct.
And we need the overlay test for the SMA.
Yes.
So when you're doing design work, the specification calls when we have our JMF1, which is our paper design, right? And then we're going to go to run our trial batch. MTD has how many days to be able to run the overlay test?
10 days.
10 days. So again, if they are the only ones that have it and they have 10 working days to run this test, it's 10 working days when you receive the sample.
When we receive the sample. So this is a big issue, Chuck. So what typically happens is a contractor will submit it to the district. There's some period of time where they're handing it off. Maybe the district lets it sit around, and then there's the shipping. And so by the time we get it, it may have already been 10 days.
Yeah.
And then we get it. We typically turn them around in about 5 days. But there are the instances it's a little bit more. But if it's already been sitting around for 10 days, the end user, being the contractor's been waiting on a sample for 15, 20 days.
Absolutely. And so then when you get the trial batch and then we're going into production, you could still have another 10 days to verify that production sample. So what I'm trying to get through is that you just can't say I'm going to run TOM mix and SMAs tomorrow, okay? The new specification is going to require you to redesign to make sure that you meet the new specification, and then you're going to have a minimum of 10 days, and it possibly be 20 days if you don't pass the first 10 days.
That's right.
So I'm just trying to get across to the contracting community is don't think that you're going to be laying TOM mix tomorrow or the next day if you're now working on your new design and with the new specification.
That's right.
And so in April is when the new specification went into play. So everybody that picked up TOM jobs for this overlay season, for TOM or SMAs for this overlay season, get your designs in early. So I can't stress that enough. You don't want to be held up because of the overlay test.
That's right.
So, so you say you have 4 overlay tests going on right now?
We've got 4 overlay tests, and we are working on an approved list as we speak.
Good. When do you think that's going to come through?
So right now we're working with one of our universities. We're trying to identify people throughout the state. We're actually going to run round robins on 10 different Hamburg machines, 10 different overlay, and 10 different ideal CT. So I'll be reaching out shortly to contractors and TXDOT, and we would like to do a round robin. When the overlays, we did have the manufacturer come down and give us a calibration on all of them.
Okay.
We've got a new calibration procedure. He's got a jig for calibration, and so he's actually already been to most of the contractor labs as well.
Okay.
So they'll be one of the ones that are involved in this
So
study.
we're thinking maybe in the next 3 months, 4 months, 6 months?
I would think, yeah, we're hoping within the next few weeks we'll start shipping samples.
Okay.
And then once we have that data to analyze, then we'll know what this approved list is going to look like.
Great. Well, if you would keep us in the loop, so that way we can keep our members in the loop, because I know it's a big conversation piece that we have across the deal. So with that being said, we got the placement test. We had again 1As and 1Bs need to be certified to be able to do these placement tests. One of the ones that I see up there is establishing the rolling pattern, the in-place density of nuclear, in other words, getting the rolling pattern established. That's on the QC side.
Correct.
So does QA need to witness that? Or is it just 100% QC?
It's QC. At the end of the day, TXDOT's going to pay for the project based on air voids,
right,
and that's going to be based on the actual core.
Absolutely.
So this is a quality control. Make sure you're getting the density. That way when that core lands in that random location, you can feel confident that it was done correctly and you've met density.
What about your segregation profile and your longitudinal joints? So I'm the contractor, I'm QC, I got to run the test. QA's got to witness the test while I'm running them?
They should be.
Yep, should be. Being able to understand that I'm performing the test during the intervals, and we'll talk about the intervals here in a little bit. And then, of course, we have the shear bond strength. That's a test that only MTD can run. It's informational purposes only, but I do know that several districts are really looking at trying to establish some minimum shear bond strengths. So you guys have been running a lot?
So we run quite a bit. Keep in mind right now this is an informational test. There are quite a few districts that have actually set up to run it as well. So I know Austin District, for example, has their own database that they're maintaining, and they require informational shear bond test on every project.
Right. And I think that's real important for everybody to realize is that we do have these performance tests. We got the Hamburg, we got the overlay test, you got the shear test, and of course we have density. You have some of these performance tests that are going to help us prove the fact that we're getting durable, long-lasting material out there. And I think that, again, for informational purposes, the contracting community should know those numbers.
Yeah.
You know, so as soon as those numbers become generated, get with your district, get with your area, and try to get those numbers back so that we understand and we know where we're at.
Yeah, and one thing I would like to point out is when you run the shear test, we should be running that within the first few lots. Use that to establish the bond for the remainder of the project. I don't want to come in after the project's been done, run a shear, and then say, well, this is horrible shear. Now what do we do?
Yeah, now what do we do? And we've had that conversation. As a matter of fact, we just had it the other day, is that we need to really run it within the first couple of days of production.
Correct.
Yeah, you don't want to run it, 3 or 4 weeks or a month later. It's not going to give you the same results as if you run it, within the next 2 or 3 days. So with that, reporting and responsibility, here's where we really get into the meat and potatoes of where we're talking about, is that we definitely need to use the department-provided templates to record and calculate all the test data. And before we started this, the TXAPA Live, Travis and I were talking about where these forms are at. They're site manager forms, but the QC doesn't have access to site manager. They just got access to the forms.
Correct. So these forms are Excel, right? So they're written in Excel. We post them on our TXDOT website under the forms/site manager. That's where you'll locate them. But for the district, when they're building out their project, MTD actually assigns all of the sampling and testing requirements. So when they go to that physical project, it'll populate the forms that they need. So they should be able to pull the brand new forms directly from their project file.
So, and when you say these forms, so the forms are where you're collecting the data, you're putting the data into these forms, and then the results. So I want to make sure that everybody understands the difference between data and results, because we've had multiple conversations about sharing results but not sharing data. And I think sometimes we get a little confused in that area. So explain to us again, data sharing is probably not what we need to do. Result sharing is what we should do.
So so the way we've kind of defined that loosely, I guess, is results are the final answer.
Right.
What is the final density? What is the overall asphalt content? What is the percent passing a number 4 sieve?
Right.
That's what I would deem results.
Results.
The data or raw data, right, is what'd you get for a dry weight on your dunked sample. That doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't mean anything to me. I don't know why we should be sharing that back and forth. Now, if we do have a discrepancy, right, we're looking at our results and you're getting a 97 and I'm getting a 96, then by all means we should sit down and we should compare our raw data and make sure that, did I fudge a number? Did I run something incorrectly? If we notice that, all of my wet weights are heavier than yours, but everything else is in line,
We take a look at why.
we need to go back and look at the process.
And that's real important. Again, partner through those items and those areas, but you have the results first. QA already has all the results, and then if something doesn't match up, look at the raw data to see if there's an issue at that point. And again, I think you said something about it doesn't become an issue until it leaves the lab,
That's right. That's
so
right.
Resolve those issues at the lab, and especially if you have something that's really a transposed number, or maybe a scale's not calibrated, or you're off on the calibration. So those are real important to do. The other thing there is real important underneath 4.2 is that the engineer and contractor will provide available test results to the other party when requested. So we're going to get into the tables when they're have to be done, but when requested, that information needs to be done, needs to be exchanged. And the maximum allowable time for the contractor and engineer to exchange test data is given in Table 7. We're going to go to that here in a couple of seconds. But here's a really big one, is that the engineer and contractor will immediately report any test results that require suspension of production and placement, a pavement adjustment, a factor less than 1, or that fails to meet the specification. In other words, as soon as I see that my AC's out, or as soon as I see my VMA's out, I got to let you know, and you got to let me know.
That's right.
So this kind of overrules table number 7. So that, again, immediately when a test result results in a suspension of production or placement, or a pay adjustment less than 1, or fails to meet the specification, we're supposed to immediately let each other know.
That's right.
So that's where that conversation and communication and the partnering that we keep talking about between QC and QA come into play. It's very important. And then, of course, record and electronically submit all test data on the templates. So do you have any issues with what's going on with the site manager templates, anything like that? Do we have any issues? You had said earlier that we need to get the most current, up-to-date templates and not just use the ones that we did 7 or 8 months ago, because why?
Yeah, so the two issues that we see routinely are all from saving them on your desktop, which is not a problem in itself, right?
Right.
But people will save one on their desktop, they'll use it from a previous project, and so we may make changes that affect a pay factor or something that was incorrect on the previous template, and before you know it, somebody's using one that's 2 years old. There's been changes since then.
Right.
The other issue that we see is somebody uses one that's already pre-populated, they delete what they think they need to delete, and then go back without realizing they left some data populated in it.
That's right.
So always good to start a project on a fresh template.
Great. And the forms, when we're doing these weights and the forms, Corey Schwartz out of the HMA Center has these forms that are really they're the forms that anybody can use within the 1A at the lab. They're the forms are consistent use of being able to fill out the forms. I think that's real important. Consistency between QC and QA is so important, so that when we do have an issue, we can easily identify it. So here's the templates. Here's some of the templates, and you said that as soon as you pull it up, it automatically populates.
So the templates themselves don't auto-populate. The blue fields on all of our templates, so TxDOT tries to standardize it across all of TxDOT. The blue fields are entry fields.
Right.
That means you can fill them in. All of the white fields are protected. They have formulas in them.
Right.
If you're able to change a white cell for some reason,
You're in trouble.
You're in trouble. You shouldn't be able to.
So, and again, these are found online, and we should all have them. Should not be a problem. And we should all be utilizing them. And again, the raw data, the forms to fill out the raw data, Corey really and truly has done a great job with those forms.
And,
so
and
consistency.
what I would say, if you're a contractor and you don't have the form, reach out to your local district and ask them for the latest and greatest form. That should be something they should be able to easily provide to make sure you're using the latest and greatest. Because at the end of the day, when the district uploads the data into Site Manager, it's going to revert to the latest and greatest form. So if you're using one that's 3 years old and it's saying everything's good, and then you upload it and something's changed, all of a sudden something may be out.
So the main thing here is, what is QC and what is QA? We have a lot of discussion about that I think just the basic knowledge of what QC's role and responsibility and what QA's role and responsibilities are. So kind of walk me through your QA, your TxDOT, your representative, your CE&I, you represent TxDOT, you are QA.
Yep.
Okay? Quality assurance. All of my pay factors are based on your results.
That's right.
Now, me being QC, I have a requirement that I have to run certain tests at certain times, but my results are only utilized to be able to see, when you get QA results, whether or not we have a discrepancy to be able to go to referee.
That's right.
So does QC have to run lab densities? So lab densities, I noticed that we have to run ACs and we have to run gradations, but we don't necessarily have to run lab densities.
Yeah, and the reason is that TxDOT, for quality assurance, is running them, right?
That's right.
So we're doing acceptance based on TxDOT results. So when TxDOT is not doing the testing per the guide schedule, right? If it's not required, then that responsibility is put off on the contractor to do more testing, and then TxDOT will have maybe minimal testing to verify at some given interval. Say 1 per 12 sublots, we'll do a test, and that just verifies that the contractor's results are in
good.
line with what we're getting.
Absolutely. So it's real important that QC, follows that and understands where QA's at. And so for me as QC, I'm running lab densities just with you, so that way if I do have a discrepancy, we have a sample or we have knowledge that we can send it to materials and tests for
Absolutely.
referee.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that clears up a little bit of QC QA. I know that it seems kind of basic, but QC's having the samples themselves, the custody of the samples really doesn't matter to QC. It's all QA. That's right. Your custody matters because it affects the pay.
The ultimate pay. Yep.
So QC, doesn't matter if I have custody, but QA has to have custody. And that's really important, especially with the referee samples. Referee samples we've seen in the past where they might have just been stuck in a barn somewhere or out on the loading dock somewhere. You really and truly, QA, whether it's TxDOT or TxDOT representative, needs to have possession of that sample, needs to be in a secure place, and only TxDOT has access to that sample.
That's right, and actually that's a FHWA requirement as well, right? Part of our program, we've stated that we'll maintain custody of samples used for acceptance, so we have to maintain custody of these samples.
All right, so here's the big one. Here's reported by the contractor, reported to the engineer. We got gradation, asphalt binder, lab molded densities, moisture content, boil test when required, and then we have 1 working day from completion of the sublot. So why is that so important? Why is it one day of the sublot?
Very important. As you know, we run 4 tests a day, right? Of each one of these, right? We're running 1 per sublot. What we want to avoid is to be 5 days down the road and find out that lot 1, sub 1 failed, and everything else you've done up until now, lot 5 may also be failing.
Right.
So very important that we catch the issues immediately, we address them immediately. So that's why we have 1 working day completion of sublot.
And with the pricing right now that we have on asphalt, I mean, we're talking $50,000, $60,000 per sublot.
That's right.
I mean, it's a very important. I mean, I would not want to be exposed. If I'm a contractor, I would not want to be exposed any more than I possibly could have. And again, on the quality assurance, where the production quality assurance, where the engineer's reporting to me, the contractor, you have the same requirements, 1 working day from the completion of the sublot. So if I'm the contractor and I'm not getting that information back and forth, what do I need to do? I need to escalate, I need to discuss, I need to...
all of the above. All of the above. You need to talk to the 1A, the 1B that are representing TxDOT, make sure they understand, escalate it, go to their boss, right? Make sure that we've got good communication. Point out the specification. It's in there to protect TxDOT and the contractor.
Yep.
Right? So point it out. And as a contractor, if there's a test that's not required of you, I would still recommend to run it if it could benefit you, because
Absolutely.
There's always the issue that TxDOT may make a mistake. They don't get it to you in time. If the contractor says I'm getting 96s and TxDOT says I'm getting 97 density.
Yeah.
Well, now we've got a discrepancy. Now, TxDOT may be right in this scenario, but we need to make sure, because the contractor's utilizing that density to gear their production. They're adjusting the plant based on all of that data that they're getting.
Right.
But if they're 1% off, they need to know that.
Absolutely.
And if TxDOT's paying a 97 where it's really a 96, it's good that you ran that contractor sample to compare to.
Absolutely, and that's so important. Again, that's the conversation that you got to have. It's got to go both ways. That information's got to flow both ways. So on the placement, we got in-place air voids, segregation profiles, longitudinal joint thermal profiles. That's the contractor to the engineer. 1 working day from the completion of the lot. So at the end of the lot, I have 1 working day to make sure that you have all that information. And of course, some of these, like the in-place densities, might take longer than that, because just the fact of where it might land. But from a quality assurance, this is so important that the engineers got to let the contractor know 1 working day after receiving the trim cores, and then 1 working day from the completion of the lots for the profiles and the thermal profiles. I can't stress enough that we really and truly need to pay attention to that. And the very last one there, the pay adjustment summary, the engineer to the contractor, 2 working days of performing all the required tests and receiving the contractor's test data. So we should never be more than 2 working days without knowing whether or not we have a 105 pay factor or we have a 95 pay factor, right?
That's right.
So again, if we're not getting this information back and forth, and again, it says right there that the contractor's test data, so you have to receive all the contractor's test data also for that 2 days to work.
That's right.
And it's so important. So it really and truly, it's on the contractor's shoulders to make sure that he gives the engineer everything he has before he can say, hey, you didn't give me my 2 working day within 2 working days. And again, it's to protect both sides. I think this is real important. This is to protect both sides, the contractor and the engineer, in terms of what kind of pay factors we're paying. So with that being said, it's going to throw us into Table 17. And Table 17 is the frequency test.
Yeah.
So you got 1 per 12 sublots on the gradation, right?
That's right.
So, and the contractor's got to run it 1 per sublot. So if the contractor has a failing sample, and we got 3 out in a row, we have to suspend production until we fix out what we need to fix to make sure that we can get back in. So every time, as a contractor, every time I have a gradation that's out, I'm going to let you know. Even though I don't have to let you know until I'm out of production, suspension, I'm going to let you know anyway. Because if I have 2 out and you get to pull 1 sample in the 12 and you get 1 out, then I'm in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So it's better for the contractor to let the engineer know his results when he's running these frequency tests, right? I think it's very important that we're all on the same page. And then, of course, we have the segregation profile and the density profiles. You know, we got 1 per sublot, you got 1 per project. But witnessing is, that's real important out in the field. Your 1B out in the field needs to be witnessing those tests so that we're both on the same page. You know, and again, it's going to protect you as the contractor, and again, it gives you confidence as the engineer that I'm on top of my game. I think that's the biggest thing. And then, of course, you got 1 per project for asphalt binder sampling testing. You got several that are 1 per project, but I'm suggesting that you don't wait to the end of the project to have that sample pulled. Okay, so when you get your AC sample, contractors, have the engineer run some AC samples on you and tack sample. You don't want a 1 tack sample at the end of the project and it fails for whatever reason, and then what do? You know, that's
right.
the problem.
And keep in mind, you know, with the binder samples, we do take these every day, but we only are required to run 1 per project.
That's right.
So if that 1 per project fails and you're on lot 3, you have other samples you can pull from, and maybe we can identify that you had contamination one day versus this is actually a bad binder and something's happened with the supplier, and
Right.
you don't go and pave
Another 3 days.
$1 million worth of hot mix to find out that the binder's bad.
Absolutely, and again, transparency, people. I mean, I just can't stress it enough. Is that let's be transparent and how we pull the samples, who has chain of custody of the samples, and the direction that we need to be in. So with that, that's the importance of the time frame. Again, we hit 3077, but the new specifications, our TOM, our SMAs, our thin bonded wearing courses, and our PFCs got some requirements in there. We really need to pay attention to the time frame on the requirements and really and truly get to know those specifications. So we got the 2024 spec coming up, right?
We do.
So when's the last time we can comment on this 3076, 3077, and the other 4? Is it you going to give us all the way till?
So we are trying to get the 2024 spec rewrite completed by January of 23.
Okay.
And that's our deadline for MTD. We're going to take it and we're going to send it off to FHWA and then pressure them to turn around and give us approval, because the idea is we'd like to have a digital copy by the following September, and then as of January of 2024, we want a physical book.
Okay. All right, so that's real important, okay, January of 2023, so that doesn't give us a ton of time. So please, if you're having issues with 3076 and 3077, reach out to Jim Warren and myself, and we'll get that back over to Travis. We're working closely with the AGC, Glenn Dvorak's over that specification rewrite. We're working real closely with Glenn and those guys at the AGC. But if you see something that we need to address in 3076 and 3077, let us know immediately. And then on the new specifications, the guiding force of the new specifications for the TOMs, the thin lifts, SMA is temperature. There's a lot in there about minimum and minimum temperatures of place and maximum temperatures of production. And please, everybody, look at those temperatures, because I was out on a project and it completely amazed me on how quick we lost temperature on one of our projects. So please take a look at that, and we can comment back to Travis. We need to get that done. So with that, anything else that we need to cover here, Travis? You think we covered it all?
I think that's it.
You think so? Yeah. So how many times do you get called on the carpet because you haven't turned your results around in a timely manner?
We get quite a few calls from contractors asking for overlay results, and immediately, obviously, it's our fault. But when we look it up, a lot of the times we receive it a week after they sampled it. They'll say we sampled it on the 11th. It's the 20-something. Why don't you have it? And we received it on the 23rd, right?
Yeah.
That's why.
So pay attention to the time frame. And it's the same thing with these oil samples. We got to pay attention. If we're sending them into materials and tests, there's a lot of information that needs to be on the cans, a lot of information that needs to be filled out. And that guidance document is online. It's on our webpage. It's also on TxDOT's webpage. But that guidance document really is very detailed, very, we should be able to pay attention to it and make sure that we give you the information that y'all need so that y'all can track the cans, be able to know where the material came from, and if we do have an issue, we can track that issue down.
Yeah.
So with that being said, we're done with TXAPA Live. We thank Jim Warren for being at the helm for us, and we'll see you next week.